Okay, we have a power panel today. Matt Orfalea, who is in some kind of jail. We're not totally sure what kind with YouTube right now, but he's going to give us an update. And then Robert Barnes, the legal watchdog of all things censorious. So, Matt, you and I have been playing kind of censor ping pong because first you were on my channel. We did this video about how corporate news is allowed to break YouTube's medical misinformation guidelines. And we were just showing the videos from CNN and NBC. And then I got the video removed and a strike on my channel and suspended for that. So then you very kindly took up my cause on Twitter. And then you had me on your channel to talk about it. I was later reinstated to my channel. The suspension was reversed with no communication, just all of a sudden one day I was allowed back in. But then our video on your channel was removed, and that's still, I believe, right, is removed. And like, so what's the update for where we're at? Because I feel like we're trading karma at this point.
Yeah, that video I made citing your video and defending your video and explaining how your video was only exposing misinformation from the mainstream news channels, not endorsing the misinformation, exposing it. That video is still removed by YouTube. It's every stage. I think it can't get more crazy.
If I remember, though, this latest one, which is weird, the wording was, we're removing it, but maybe you didn't realize you were breaking our rules, so we're not going to give you a strike, which I haven't seen before.
Yeah, so that was kind of odd. Maybe it's because they finally admitted an error on the second strike they gave me, which was the one associating me with violent criminal organizations for a 7-year-old Starbucks commercial parody. So I don't know. Maybe that's why they didn't give me a strike for that one. It's very odd. It's hard to make sense of. All I know is it's crazy.
So, okay, Robert, you're kind of familiar with this at this point. I know we talked about this before. Really, you and I did a live stream a few months ago. I think I titled it something like coincidence or collusion or something like that. I can't remember. But the question we keep asking here is, what is the government's role in pushing the flagging of this information? And at what point do these organizations stop being private corporations with the protections thereof and become an arm of the government?
You know, from a legal perspective, it requires a great degree of collusion for them to become state actors, to the extent that you can say they're essentially just agents of the state without autonomy. Now I have an alternative theory that they should be constitutionally considered state actors under the Pruneyard doctrine in California, under the California state constitution. I think same doctrine should apply federally, which is, once they're occupying a public space or a traditional public role, such as regulating the public square, then they should be considered a state actor. But right now, that's an uphill battle legally. Generally speaking, if they are, like, even people who receive money and have conditions in their contracts are generally not considered state actors. What's required is that the state say, we want this to happen, and then they do it in direct response to that. That's what the courts are currently requiring for state actor status.
So what before we get into like what is going on behind the scenes with the AI too, if you're somebody who's in Matt's position, I mean, because we've seen Trump obviously has filed another lawsuit. It just seems like a lot of this right now is theatrics and I don't know, like, even Trump's lawsuit, like, is there any weight to that? Is there anything we can do from a legal perspective at this point? Or is that all still kind of, I don't know. It just seems very unclear that that's the path forward.
Yeah. I mean, the best suit pending is the Bobby Kennedy. Well, actually, probably co-equal. Harmeet Dillon has a very good claim against the state of California, because there she caught their hand in the cookie jar, and they were clearly coordinating, not only coordinating and colluding, basically taking direction at the behest of the state to target the political dissidents. And so she will likely win that case, and that will establish that that big tech can be, and that's in that particular context, Twitter can be a state actor. Now, how far they're willing to go, the next big case that will decide that is the Bobby Kennedy case that's going up on appeal, where Kennedy and the Children's Health Defense, they had a lot of detailed evidence, not quite to the level that Harmeet Dillon found, but a lot more than what Trump alleged. and the district court dismissed it at the district court level, so it's going to go up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, might go up to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it also raises the question of where exactly is that line? Can they play a game of, well, the state didn't directly tell us to do it, it was just wink, wink, nod, nod, like what happened in Bobby Kennedy's case in Children's Health Defense. If I don't think Trump has any chance in the current status of the litigation, but if he's smart, he would amend, use the statements made by the press secretary, for Joe Biden, saying, "Oh yeah, we flag it and tell him what to do." She's the gift that keeps on giving. It's like Scott Adams used to say Hillary Clinton had some sort of mole because Hillary was saying and doing things that were so counterproductive for the campaign. But now I think maybe it was the Biden's press secretary all along, because she's contributing at a key juncture. She's making key contributions to the claims against them. But right now, a lot of that's still uphill. So we're going to have to get some courts to be more generous, or otherwise I think it mostly sets up, and I think this is Trump's objective, mostly sets up to challenge and contest the law as it exists and say we need to change the law because these people are too big and there's too much collusion going on.
Is this kind of what you're talking about?
Yes.
Jen talking? Okay. So this just came out, Biden administration flagging problematic posts for Facebook. During a Thursday press conference, Psaki said White House senior staff were engaging with social media platforms to combat the spread of misinformation, specifically on the pandemic. And I got to say, and I don't know, Matt, if you've noticed this yourself, I think you probably have, but I have just personally noticed an escalation. And I don't know if that's just like, okay, I got one video flagged. And so once you get one flag, now you're higher up on the naughty list for the AI. And then it's just really hard to get out of that net. But Matt, do you feel like you're noticing just more, more just focus on your channel, more strikes, just more activity in general?
Absolutely. I'd had no issue, no warning, no strikes whatsoever until last month. And I've had 3 instances. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 videos removed, my entire channel demonetized.
Oh my God.
What else? And yeah, 2 strikes. One of them, they admitted error. The other one was for a unpublished, already deleted video, which is mind-boggling.
I think that's the most egregious thing. And one thing that maybe newcomers to this conversation should hear is that you're always, the talking point is that they're stopping the spread of misinformation, right? That's exactly what, we see even here, to combat the spread of misinformation. But how are you spreading misinformation if your video has already been deleted? And that's something that to me is like harassment. I mean, that at no point is something that's affecting anyone because it was deleted. So it just doesn't make any sense.
And it was never public.
Yeah, you're right. It was unlisted, right? First,
yes.
And then you were deleting them because you had gotten flagged on an unlisted post.
I'd gotten a warning. They removed 3 of my unlisted rough cuts. And so I removed the rest to avoid a strike, but that didn't make a difference. They gave me a strike the next day, even though I'd already deleted it. It's just
Robert,
insane.
You think this is AI related?
Yes, I think what's happened is that now the key people is whoever's designing the terms for the AI to scrape. So, that's where the political motivation and the political discrimination is occurring. That's where the state collusion may be occurring. But in seeing, when they struck Eric Hunley's channel, when they initially wouldn't, grant the appeal for striking your video, in some other cases that I've seen, it's increasingly evident that they are doing a textual live time transcript of words that if they catch certain words that the AI then interferes and intervenes, and that even the appeal, I think, is being done at an AI level. And it's just because they refuse to employ enough personnel to manage this process with human beings. And the only time you get a human being, I believe, is when enough of political stink is raised, like it was over Eric Hunley's channel, like it was over Allison's video, that some human being looks at it, and that's when you get, as long as you get enough political pressure, that's where often you get a remedy. And I think I remember arguing years ago with Twitter that what they were trying to do was going to be unmanageable and unsustainable over time. And I was arguing, look, just create terms of service that are consistent with the First Amendment, That's a much more manageable process. And then you can use your AI technology to do something that's borrows from 200 years of case law. You can prevent stalking and harassment and obscenity and all those things. Those things are outside the protection of the First Amendment, but otherwise just make it First Amendment consistent. And to give an example of how this could be done, Locals has done it. The only thing Locals prohibits, every content creator can have their own standards, but Locals only universally prohibits things that violate First Amendment standards. And they encoded it into their AI. So that's where people can say anything they want unless someone on the content creator doesn't like it. So there's a few things X that I don't like. You got to be nice. You got to be civil, or you have to get shot down, Clay Travis style. But so I think that shows the capacity, and they're inviting trouble because they have these very vague, obscure terms of service. They compound the problem with AI that's often flags things that make no sense. And I have no doubt that what happened is the same AI that originally flagged Allison's video likely flagged Matt's video.
Yeah.
But the problem is
That's
human
why it
being.
feels like we're connected, like we're bedfellows in this.
Yeah, exactly. It's something like they hear, oh, there's that information that's not supposed to be there. Delete video. And then you appeal and you get that Orwellian response that, hey, you should feel good about this because we're just here to protect people. And we're not really sure why we did what we did. If it might have been for this reason or this reason. And if it wasn't for reason 1 or 2, maybe it was reason 3 or 4, which would drive most people insane. Just that response. YouTube would be better off with just saying, hey, we screwed you today. Thank you. Goodbye.
I agree. Yeah. Stand by your decision making, and that was the story that I told when I did my live stream once I was allowed back into my channel, was about when I was covering wildlife in Washington State, and there was this, I won't get into all the details of it, but the state made this decision to euthanize some deer and elk at a rehab facility, saying that their science and law required that these habituated animals not be released back into the wild. And they just had to be killed, but they couldn't round up all of them. There were 12 altogether. So we're going to come back for the rest, without giving the rehab any due process to talk about, well, we're trying to rehab them so that they can be released back into the wild, or you can't just come onto our property and kill animals. What's the due process? And I remember this whole thing covering this. And of course, so I do the story, there's insane backlash from the public. And then all of a sudden the biology and the law doesn't matter anymore. And the state's like, we're not going to come back for the rest of the animals. We'll leave them alone. And you're like, I remember, on one hand, if you were kind of I guess more of an egomaniac reporter, you would say, oh yeah, my reporting changed the day. But I was sitting there kind of depressed because I was like, I don't know if I like it that my reporting was what made this difference here, because it makes me realize that if just enough people complain about something, your biology and law just goes out the window, which then if you take that to the next level, who's doing the most power wielding on a regular basis? The people who have the lobbyists, the people who have the control, the people who are in power. People like me and Matt don't have the time and the resources to constantly wage public relations wars against YouTube. And frankly, even in my particular case, there was public backlash so I got back in. But let's say CNN had decided that they didn't like me and they didn't want me to be allowed back. I probably would not have been allowed back. The only reason that the sort of backlash worked in that case was because there was not anybody higher up that wanted to keep me out. But at some point that could happen. And it just goes to show that this is not about community guidelines based in science. This is about who wields the biggest stick. And that for the most part is always going to be people controlling the narrative. And I think that's the most depressing thing about this. Like I said, saw it as a reporter in Washington, now seeing it with these corporate tech companies. And it's kind of depressing because, again, you think about how many of these situations are happening that we never see, and how often these companies are making decisions based on these elite power brokers that we'll never have a chance to fight back against.
Yeah. I just want to say, we brought up how it's AI. It seems like it's AI recognizing the same clips in your video and my video, and that's why they both got taken down. But what's so revealing is the clips that were in our videos are also in NBC and CNN videos. The misinformation that it recognized in our videos was from NBC and CNN videos on YouTube, and those videos have not been taken down. And so this is just such an excellent example of how unfair an enforcer this YouTube AI is.
Yeah, it's not capable of being impartial. It's not capable of being First Amendment consistent because of how they've written it. And what's even worse is, NBC and those institutional media are also getting promoted. I mean, chances are that those same videos getting flagged for deletion, if anybody simply keeps references them in their own video, are likely being promoted by YouTube otherwise. And it shows the absurdity of the circumstance.
Yeah. So then the big question is, like, why are they writing it that way? Because on one hand, I would like to believe that, hey, give Susan Wojcicki benefit of the doubt. She's just getting bullied by Congress and she has to do it. But it just seems weird if you have smaller tech companies with a lot less clout able to figure it out. Why are these big tech companies not able to figure it out? And just that people don't, think I'm just holding this random pamphlet up for no reason. This is from the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory on building a healthy information environment. And one of the things they say is that, we need to strengthen the monitoring of misinformation. Platforms should increase staffing of multilingual content moderation teams and improve the effectiveness of machine learning algorithm, blah, blah, blah. Since non-English language misinformation continues to proliferate, platforms should also address misinformation in live streams, which are more difficult to moderate. So now they're going to start adding people to our live streams and knock us out in the middle. But so this is just another thing coming from the federal government related to the pandemic and misinformation and everything. And this, so they're getting a lot of pressure. But like I said, the pressure is, I think, applied all over the place. So if you have a Locals or you have a ROKFIN or whatever, ODYSEE, that are still willing to allow for free speech, it does sort of push back on this idea that, like, Susan, and Jack and Mark are just tied by congressional pressure.
No doubt. In my view, it's a threefold process. First is that you have big tech itself, the engineers of big tech, the CEOs of big tech, a lot of the investors in big tech believe in using this technology to control the conversation, to gatekeep the narrative and what's allowed to be discussed and not. And now some of them, Jack Dorsey said he was going to be the free speech wing of the free speech party. And that's why, like yesterday, he's out there promoting some other open Bitcoin platform. I'm like, why would anybody trust you at this point? Nothing's going to be an open platform if Jack Dorsey's involved. But I think as a whole, they really believe in this. And I think that's part of it. And it's definitely the case that their engineers and a lot of their key policy personnel, the people writing this AI, administering this AI, reviewing this AI, are definitely to the left. And then the second component is definitely there's certain degrees of government collusion by official administrative agencies. Sometimes it goes as far as the case that Harmeet Dillon documented, where it's just purely they're acting as an agent of the state. Other times it's Bobby Kennedy's situation, where it's kind of in between, where Zuckerberg and Fauci are just wanting to chat over emails and discuss what should be done without any official orders. And so I think there's government collusion that's taking place. But the third thing is the combination of big media and the government and investors came to bring massive pressure on the last 5 years. There is that part. Doesn't excuse big tech, but does explain it in part, particularly someone like a Jack Dorsey, where, New York Times wrote big hit pieces saying YouTube is promoting right-wing rabbit holes. Their whole goal was to force YouTube to change their algorithms and to manipulate their algorithms to only go to approved institutional media. The goal was New York Times was bleeding cash. All the big institutional media were bleeding cash. The old model was no longer working. And especially as ordinary people get to choose a lot of different places, they were choosing those alternatives. And this was costing them money, and most importantly, for a lot of them, costing them influence. Bezos doesn't own the Washington Post to make money. He owns it for power. And so they put massive pressure on big tech saying, look, we're going to run hit piece after hit piece after hit piece on you. George Soros was trying to sink their stock again and again and again for the exact same purpose, combined with congressmen saying we're going to regulate you or we're going to use lawfare against you and so forth, to say you better agree with our censorship mode of operation and you better elevate, again, the institutional media's dominance on your platforms, or because of the threat these platforms pose to their existence and their dominance. And it worked. Every big tech company folded. Even someone like Jack Dorsey, who I think didn't really want to go down that route, ultimately folded because he doesn't want George Soros waging war on his stock every day, doesn't want congressmen coming after him every day, and doesn't want New York Times writing hit pieces every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting question, not just with big tech, but with corporate media, when you start trying to understand how decisions are made and how much of it is peer pressure, how much of it is groupthink, how much of it is purposeful and like aware propaganda. Because as we've talked about many times before, like I think there's a wide variety in my old industry, and I just wonder sometimes about the mindset of the people that are actually like the ones who are doing the work, maybe not, and maybe even the top dogs like Zuckerberg or Dorsey. Like, do they really think they're doing the right thing? Do they really think they're doing the moral thing? Or do they know that they're kind of compromising on, speech values and the danger that could come from that, but they just don't care? Before we get into that topic though, Robert, thank you for promoting my wine company.
Yeah, that is some good wine. That is seriously, that's legit wine. And it's like over half off. So it's like, that's a serious discount.
Half off shipping and the wine itself. AllisonWinePromo.com. Allison with 1L winepromo.com. Argentinian Malbecs, one from the third highest vineyard in the world. But I bring it up because honestly, so two quick things. One of the ways that YouTube throttles your ability to make this successful on their platform is, in Matt's case, demonetizing. You demonetize not just the videos, but the channel. So you take away the income source there. Okay, then you say you have a sponsor, like somebody like me has a sponsor for like, meager income, and then they remove me. And so then like, well, my sponsor doesn't want to, or you demonetize. And so you're not getting as many views because they're keeping you from the public eye in that regard. And it just like, there's just so many different ways that you play cat and mouse. And so I mean, back to that, I really do appreciate I think they saw, a considerable amount of like news sales from that. And so I really appreciate it. And it's nice to have a sponsor that's not like sitting there thinking, oh God, maybe Allison is too dangerous for us to work with. But it just sucks because it feels like this day and age, the idea of becoming someone who can make YouTube a sustainable source of business revenue so that you could actually be a full-time creator, just feels like those days are over unless you're doing stuff that in no way challenges any narratives, and on both sides.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think in that capacity, I mean, for some Zuckerberg, those emails with Fauci, he knows exactly what he's doing and is proud of it. But this is a guy who spent a lot of money to influence elections in 2022. I think someone like Dorsey, when you see a lot of his commentary, he knows that what he's doing is a sellout from where he started Twitter for, and he feels conflicted about it, and you don't see him bragging about it. You're probably not going to find him writing emails to Fauci talking about how else can we censor ideas and whatnot. Now, I think Susan is all for it. Google is all for it. Apparently they, that "don't be evil" slogan, they just forgot the "don't" part. It's now just be evil. And that's because that's effectively what they've done. And there has to be political pushback for them to change it all, both in the court of public opinion, the courts of law, and ultimately the courts of Congress.
Yeah. I mean, in the case of Susan Wojcicki, she really, and probably perhaps Zuckerberg as well, but I remember her expressing in a video like how she's committed to, preventing offensive videos from getting on YouTube effectively. And so she's basically putting her own, assuming that her own moral judgment is universal judgment. Yeah. So she doesn't think she's being evil. She thinks she's being the moral one, but she doesn't understand that her morals are not universal morals. And she doesn't get, I mean, how could you do it if you understood how dangerous this is when, some people have when you're literally silence half of the debate on so many important issues.
Or
for
even
example, more than, well, I mean, so coronavirus, of course, how do we approach the coronavirus? What's the best way to treat coronavirus? Obviously, that's an important subject that people should be able to discuss freely. But another one is I made a video with Tom Rockledge, who was accused of racism by his fellow New York City education boards. And I just literally had him on to defend himself. And it's clear that the accusations of racism are false because luckily the Zoom meeting was recorded. But anyway, I have him on to defend himself from career-killing smears and lies, and YouTube deemed that video hateful content that may offend individual or marginalized communities. Like, Jesus Christ.
You can't document history anymore. You literally can't even document current events anymore. Ford Fisher, Brendan Guttenschwarzer, Jeremy Lee Quinn. These are independent journalists that go to, the social unrest all over the country, and their video is allowed to be used by corporate news on YouTube, but the original video they cannot, they can't use without contextualizing. Like, that's what Ford said. YouTube told him that about his January 6th stuff, that he needs to show the other side. So they're like forcing editorializing now on independent journalists in a way they're not doing for corporate news. They don't ask for, and they don't care if corporate news contextualize it so that it's entirely false, right? I mean, no one's coming through their stuff saying, that's government propaganda. You need to contextualize that with the, the establishment questioning perspective. Of course not.
Yeah, it's not the other side. He doesn't have to contextualize to show the other side. No, like you said, it's just to show the establishment narrative, the dominant cultural narrative, the accepted narrative.
Yes, yeah. Well, and to just go back to Susan, when she was speaking with the World Economic Forum, she was very clear that she sees YouTube as a platform for the next generation of media companies. She did not say independent creators. In fact, when she was discussing the person in their garage or basement or whatever her exact terminology was, she spoke of that demeaningly. That was the thing they were trying to shed some doubt on, like to cast some doubt on and uplift these authoritative sources. So I think she's being very obvious about it. Now, on one hand, that kind of makes me even more skeptical, because there's a part of my brain that's like, why would she say that? Like, why who is she talking to? Like, who's her audience there? Because her audience certainly can't be the average YouTuber, because that just made everybody annoyed. But so is she like trying to send that message to the corporations? Like, who's she talking to now?
Yeah, the World Economic Forum. I mean, most people don't tune into that. So that was her audience, the big players, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's like, it's that book Superclass from 2008. It was written by a Kissinger guy, actually. So he was kind of, cheering it on, but his point was to take the power elite, from Mills in the 1950s, apply it to the superclass in the globalist environment. And his point was these people were shaping the global world, and they talk to each other at certain select forums, and that's who they're often say, okay, here's how we're going to control the world in the future. And everybody who wants to control the world thinks that they're a moral, righteous hero.
Right.
Even Hitler didn't think he was out to do the evil that he did in his own way. He thought he was saving the world. So that's, everybody, the first bad, that's why the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah. The more I think about it, and I guess it shouldn't be surprising, but it is surprising to me that you have somebody like Jack, Susan, those three, that are thinking that they know enough, like Matt was saying, that they have this universal consciousness, and they know enough to have the grave responsibility of silencing people. Because if you're going to do that, you better be damn well sure that that the people you're silencing really deserve it. And frankly, I don't think these people have the bona fides to do that. And I saw that in mainstream news. I remember back when there was the extremism in the media congressional hearing, just another one of those pointless hearings that they were having several months ago. And they had Soledad O'Brien, formerly of CNN, on the panel. She said the very same thing that I remember seeing Lester Holt say back when he did the sort of free expression award that YouTube won, which it also sponsored. But they both say the same thing, and it is very common. It was a very common approach when I was in the industry towards the end, which is we have to get rid of disinformation. Soledad said, just stop booking liars. Just stop booking liars. And it's like, but are you qualified to know? Like, it sounds great on the surface, I guess, if you really trusted these people to know who's lying and who's not, as if their people are not the liars, the safe people are not the liars, the literally like CIA people that they have as their own you know, their own guests now, or they're even like on paid contracts. Like these people have never lied before. They're documented liars. They literally have on their newscast. And so, but then you have them coming on saying, it's just that simple. Just stop putting disinformation out there. We have to crack down on extremism. We just stop booking liars. It's like, okay, then stop booking liars. It's like your people are lying, you know? So I don't give them the credibility that they have. That's why it's like, yeah, it sounds risky and dangerous, right? To just like start opening up this wide swath of ideas. But the other option is trusting these people who don't know what they're talking about to decide who's actually lying and who's telling the truth. Like, how can you want to give the responsibility to people that like don't even have a medical degree? It just doesn't make any sense to me. But that's a common attitude.
It's unbelievably naive to think that all you have to do is just stop booking liars. It's that simple. You know, they just look up their liar card, you know, check their ID up, they're a liar, and then you just don't book them. It's just so naive.
Yeah.
And the point you make, there's no objective metrics here. So, you know, we have this whole system of law that's designed to be truth discovery. And we have rules of evidence and objective methods and standards to assess it. And we're very careful about who gets to decide those facts, hence the jury sort of representing the court of public opinion in the manner in which it's picked. And we try to make sure they're impartial. And plenty of failures in the legal system, but at least we understand the idea of how this should be done, even if you're going to try it. And they don't. They don't have an effective jury system. They don't have objective standards. They have these vague, ambiguous, like if YouTube or Twitter or Facebook's terms of service were a law, it'd be stricken down for void for vagueness, because they create too much arbitrary standards that vest too much discretion in some low-level engineer to make their own decisions about what they think is right and what they think is true. And almost every bad war in history has been fought to some degree over people, particularly religious wars, about people who thought they had a monopoly on truth. And and this is why, you know, we created a robust free speech space, because we determined actually the best way to determine truth is to have everybody heard and have all the ideas publicly discussed, and let people make their own decision, rely upon their own cognitive capacity to determine what's true. Censorship is a guarantee that false information will become dominant, because it's a terrible mechanism and method to actually discover truth in the first place.
Yeah. Okay. Final thought from you guys. And I know we've talked kind of about this also before, but I don't see how it's possible to do science or journalism or anything that requires questioning, you know, the status quo. I don't see how you do that on these platforms. I mean, they're just not a place for scientists to talk or doctors to talk. Because in my opinion, I see the option for like journalism and the corporate newsrooms that are being allowed to do whatever they want. Either they're doing journalism, but YouTube doesn't care what they do because they're the big dogs in the pack. Or they're not doing journalism at all. And that's why they're allowed to stay, you know, because they're not questioning anything. So it feels like you just can't do that, because both science, journalism, and, you know, anything else that requires asking questions and you know, having doctors on my channel, which I really believe one of the ways I got flagged, and maybe it was an AI thing, because I've always wondered about this. There's a particular doctor I had on who, you know, has been removed from other platforms. And I just don't know if that, you know, it's like my name got associated with him, because that's when all my trouble started, was all of a sudden when, you know, I had this guy on my channel. But I just, you know, I've had other doctors that are like, they literally thought this was what you did. Like if you're facing a new virus, new treatments, nobody knows what's really going on, which was admitted by a lot of people. Like, well, we're trying to figure it out. And they just assume that like what doctors are supposed to do is share information with each other. Like, this is what worked for my patient, what worked for yours, you know, let's try new things. And you just literally cannot do that. So should YouTube just say, you know, or Facebook or Twitter, like, I can't remember who was on my channel the other day. Like, it would be better to just say, let's just do only cat videos from here on out, so that people don't have the false sense that when they come here, they're actually getting real science or they're actually getting real journalism. At least they know it's just cat videos or armpit farting, and they don't have this, you know, sense that there's anything more important happening here.
I'd say, I just have to say, So I was mocking these people like Soledad O'Brien, who thought the problem was so simple as we just stopped booking liars, saying, "Oh, because you just look at their ID, and see if it says liar." Well, that's actually the system that they're creating, a system where you're branding people liars, and you're not allowing them to speak on anything if they say one thing that challenges authority and the establishment narrative. And I just want to mention one thing real quickly. Robert brought up earlier, and he's correct, that these people controlling these social media giants, the big tech companies, they lean left, but that doesn't mean that the censorship is only affecting right-wing groups or even fringe right-wing groups. It's affecting everybody. And I'll just share a short story. Even as well, first of all, you go back to McCarthyism. I mean, who were they censoring? It was the left. And now the left is a very big range. You have full-on disastrous communism to just people really feel strongly pushing for better labor rights, higher minimum wage. So it's a real general category. And my experience first started in 2016 when I exposed censorship on PBS. PBS had cut out crucial parts of their only interview with the third party candidate Jill Stein of the Green Party. They cut out all criticism she made of Hillary Clinton and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so what happened to the video I made exposing that on Facebook? Well, that got censored itself. And I never even received a notification about that.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, the core of this censorship is institutional versus independent. It secondarily has an ideological tilt, but that ideological tilt is more of a neoliberal New York Times tilt than certain the anti-war left is going to be targeted, the anti-surveillance state left is going to be targeted, and definitely what I would call the independent left is going to be targeted. The Young Turks may not get hit, but your Jimmy Dores, your Aaron Mates, your Max Blumenthals, your Gray Zones, your Matt Taibbis, your Glenn Greenwalds. I mean, and that's why Greenwald's been screaming about this as much as anybody, probably the biggest in the journalistic space, left, right, or otherwise, because he understands where this is going to go. This is an extension of the surveillance state. And the surveillance state is mostly, you go back to Foucault and, Bentley's Panopticon is designed to create, and Chomsky's, the creation of fake press and fake media, it's designed to create self-censorship, because there's no better form of censorship than self-censorship. And it's already worked. I mean, when Viva and I do our channels, careful, we're both going to be careful about certain topics because, he spent 10 years to build a channel, doesn't want to see it erased overnight. All that equity, all that really, for him, real blood, sweat, and tears. And so it's already partially there. And so that's what this goal is about. It's about only the institutional press is allowed. And I remember telling my friends on the left, it is inevitable they're going to target the left. And historically, you're right. The left has usually been the source of anti-war, anti-establishment, anti-financial power, anti-concentrated power, the misuse and abuse of governmental power, particularly since the 60s. I mean, it depends on, where you put the communist left and all that. But the civil liberties left was the free speech movement started at Berkeley. Now it's unfortunately gone the other direction. But that's who they're absolutely going to be coming for. And they'll start with people that are the most independent and the most combined independent and successful. They'll start there, but they're going to accelerate and accelerate. And whether Jimmy Dore will be there a year or two from now, whether other people like that will be there, whether Aaron Mate, the Gray Zone, and so many other people, the Gaggle, the Duran. There's a whole bunch of people. The Duran is more mixed in terms of politics, but a lot of people that are on the left are going to be targeted because that's the next wave to come. But they needed as little criticism from that side of the aisle as possible. So they were going to start with Alex Jones. They were going to start with people on the so-called right, but they're always going to go to anybody who's independent. Sooner or later, that kind of neoliberal, imperialistic-minded revolution is absolutely coming for the independent left next.
Matt, any last words on what people should do to help fight for you on this one? What do you need to happen, and what can they do?
Well, as we've said, the only way to get YouTube to respond, to be at all accountable, is to create some kind of storm in the press. So thanks for helping me out by doing this, Robert and Allison, and anyone listening. Just I'd say please share this video, and please, check out my Twitter. I've got the pinned tweet right there about how YouTube has rejected my appeal after removing a video where I'm just pointing out how me and Allison are in the video, removed video, pointing out how CNN and NBC are the ones spreading misinformation according to YouTube's own guidelines. But YouTube didn't take them down, didn't take their videos down. They took Allison's video down, and then they took my video down. And my video is still down. So please help me out. Let's create a little storm.
And Robert, I will say, I know you guys say you're being careful, but you did just have Alex Jones on, so that was pretty ballsy. So
I keep getting Viva to go a little bit further, a little bit further.
A little bit.
So he did spend that whole video. I mean, we've sent out invitations to Michael Tracy, Jimmy Dore, Aaron Mate, Matt Taibbi, everybody on the independent left, Glenn Greenwald as well. Because I think Viva gets increasingly. I mean, Viva's a YouTube award winner. I mean, that's who he is. And he's increasingly agitated at the suppression of independent information because he, like everyone else, thinks we should decide. And that YouTube was supposed to be the independent creators platform. And now it's become the co-opted institutional platform, suppressing and manipulating news and information so that you don't get the opinions you want from whatever perspective you want. Left, right, foreign, domestic, you name it. You cannot get honest opinions anymore because YouTube won't allow you to see them in their algorithmic manipulation or is completely censoring them and suppressing them with their video deletions and channel deletions.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate both of you. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.